So in these boot reviews and cut in half videos, we talk a little bit about shanks, and some people aren't sure what a shank is outside of the uses in prison. So let's go through a little bit about what a shank is, what the purpose of them are, the purposes of them are, and what they're made out of, just general shank information. So what is a shank? A shank is basically a structural piece of the boot that's usually made from like metal or steel, wood, fiberglass, or leather when it comes to like firefighting boots. And the shank sits usually between the heel of the boot and the pad of the boot. And the purpose of it is to add some structural support in that gap area where the heel and the pad don't meet and touch the ground. There's kind of a gap there where there's no contact with the ground. And the shank gives support in that area to help support your arch and just help structure the boot so that your boot doesn't start sagging and you lose that natural support of the arch. There's a few things that having a shank in your boot prevents. One of them is the collapse of that gap area between the heel and the pad of the foot. So you can see in this Doc Marten boot where it didn't have a shank, it started to sag in the middle there and started to bow out. So you can see the heel back here has started to lift off the ground because there's no support in that arch area, in that gap. So it was kind of flat, but as it started to bow down, that heel and the toe started to lift up. So that's where you get that boat looking effect on a cheap pair of boots. A shank isn't always needed in a pair of boots. Like if you have a wedge sole boot, it's not as necessary as having a shank inside of a boot that has a heel, because with a wedge sole boot, you got contact with the ground all the way through the boot, and you wouldn't need a shank quite as much. I've noticed in boots that I've had that don't have a shank, as soon as this gap area starts to collapse, you got a high pressure point right where the heel begins that starts digging into the forefront of the heel of your foot, because you've got support all the way through here, and then all of a sudden it drops off right at that edge of the heel, and that causes a really big pressure point, and it's pretty uncomfortable. If you're using your boots for work and you're gonna be climbing up ladders, or you're gonna be hitting shovels, or anything where you're gonna be using some really heavy pressure on that gap, or like riding horses, you're gonna want a steel shank in there or some sort of heavy duty shank, because if you think about hitting that gap in the boot over and over and over when you're shoveling all day, it's going to cause a lot of pain in the arch of your foot. Or if you're climbing up ladders all day and you're like a lineman for the county, and you're gonna be climbing up rungs of ladders and poles all day, if you're putting that rung right at the arch of your foot and you don't have any support there, your foot is just gonna start getting destroyed by those rungs. So that's probably the most common reason why you need a shank. I wanna do a little demonstration on what I'm talking about. So I've got this big heavy weight that I use for like goldsmithing that weighs probably, I don't know, like 10 pounds. And if I put this on a boot that doesn't have a shank, like this Doc Marten boot, and I roll it over that gap area between the heel and the pad of the foot, you can see that whole area collapses, and you can see where maybe that pressure point would be and how you would lose all the support in the boot and how the boot starts to bow. Versus this Timberland boot that late in the game we discovered had a steel shank. If I roll it over this boot, you can see it's not collapsing hardly at all. And there's very little bowing of the boot, and that gap area stays structurally sound. So hopefully that helps with a visual demonstration of why you might need a shank, because a lot of these videos on YouTube don't have visual demonstrations. So I'm trying to think of it. When I do these videos, I try to think of the best way to visually demonstrate what I'm talking about. So hopefully that helped. And obviously this is just kind of my opinion on it. I've had a lot of experience hunting, hiking, firefighting, work boots. And so I've got kind of an experience base to go off of, but you might have a completely different opinion of shanks. So if I missed something in this video, or if you have a differing opinion or something I missed, be sure to comment in the comment section, because the comment section can be a really good resource for after I do this video. I can go in and learn a lot, and then everyone who's watching the video can go down in the comment section and maybe see some contrasting ideas to what I say, or some more in-depth information on like shanks and leather and stuff like that. So if you do have a different opinion or you have something to add, be sure to go to the comment section and release your information. If you guys want to see some more videos of more boot basics and boot understanding, be sure to like and subscribe, because the more views and the more traction that these boot videos get, the more I can justify doing them. Yeah, I appreciate your guys' support, and see ya.